gosh, you guys, I'm like such a good thief. Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and I, apparently, love stealing. According to a dude on the internet. A while back on Twitter, someone shared a post about how anyone who accepts an ARC for review and then does not review has effectively stolen the book from the author or publisher. I, naive soul that I was, assumed that this discourse was being done in good faith, so I retweeted it with an entire thread that I reread like 10 times, making sure there was no attack of the original poster, to effectively state that my idea of the ethics of the author-reviewer dynamic meant that there could be no obligation on the side of the reviewer. The original poster saw that and replied, "Wow, you really love stealing shit. Okay, fine. High road has been tried and has failed. Let's move on." So why would I make this? Am I that pressed by a one mediocre white dude with a blog desperate for Big Daddy Publishing to love him? No. The dude seems to post the exact same blog post on an almost yearly basis and seems to get dunked on every time. One person with a weird opinion, not worth making a whole video over. However, this is part of a larger conversation that we've been having for a while, which is people putting more and more obligations on reviewers. Maybe not reading the ARC is theft, but things like the review should be a certain length. Some people say that anything over 3 paragraphs is too long. Other people saying that anything under 3 paragraphs is too short. Specifying specific star ratings. You should never post a review under 3 stars, etc. There's a lot of people putting a lot of obligations on reviewers, and any obligation on reviewers outside of be honest and be respectful is putting too much. Because once you put any level of obligation on reviewers, you have turned the entire dynamic into exploitative labor. The modern reviewing dynamic between publishers and authors and their readers is so entrenched in the modern hobby that we never stop to think about it. But if you do, you'll realize there's some big ethical gray areas here and a major power imbalance. Now, when we talk about power imbalances in this space, we're usually talking about an author specifically targeting a reviewer and sending their fan base after them for some personal petty reason. However, the system itself, as it normally runs, is in itself a power imbalance because it is paid professionals, people making money off a career, asking unpaid hobbyists, people who make no money off the work, to do their marketing for them. And yes, I'm specifically talking about money here. We will talk about book as payment later. But for example, if I accept a review copy and I read it, spend all of the hours to read it, spend at least another hour formulating that good review with several paragraphs and filming it, editing it, which is another hour or 2 on top of that, I have made no money from that process. My channel is unmonetized. So if I sell even one copy of the book based on that review, if only one person sees my review and purchases a copy of the book, I have made that author more money while making myself none. Now, yes, there are some reviewers that will make some amount of money from their reviews, but it is a very tiny percentage, and in most cases, the amount of money they earn is less than minimum wage. Keep in mind that to review a book is not just to read it, but also to formulate a decent review if you actually want at least a couple paragraphs of what worked and what didn't for that reviewer. And if they are a blogger or a YouTuber like me, they have to do yet more work on more editing and formatting and posting than the average person reviewing on Amazon or Goodreads. At best, less than minimum wage. At worst, absolutely nothing. And all of this to make someone else more money. Now, am I saying that reviewers should be paid directly by the authors and publishers for their work? No. Reviews are reviews for a reason. They need to remain unpaid to remain unbiased. The minute you start paying people is the minute they are no longer reviews, but now sponsored ads. But that does bring up the point that these people have access to standard marketing techniques. Authors and publishers, even the indie versions, have access to standard marketing procedures. Ads, paid posts, paid sponsorships with influencers. They can use all those tactics. Now, in modern reading discourse, reviews are always going to be given more weight and more credit because they are unpaid. But it is important to note that this is a choice that publishers and authors are making to rely on hobbyists to make themselves more money. So now let's talk about the concept of book as payment. This comes up a lot in these arguments that the reviewer has, yes, been paid because they got a free book, and thereby the money they saved and not having to purchase that book is ipso facto their payment. Now, I used to actually bring this up myself in these arguments, but the more I think about it, no, this is factually incorrect. Let's take it at face value that the author has given a free copy of their book and has retailed that book for a specific price. Thereby, the reviewer has saved that amount of money by not having to buy that book. Now, in most cases, this would not cover the actual cost of labor, even at minimum wage. If you were giving out a physical hardcover, which is almost non-existent as far as review copies go, it would cover maybe 2 to 3 hours of minimum wage labor. If you were giving out a digital copy, maybe 1.5 hours of minimum wage labor, depending on what these things are priced at. In most cases, the cost of the book would not cover the amount of time it would take to read the book. And this is all assuming that the reviewer would have bought the book in the first place and thereby saved money. In a lot of cases, reviewers will accept review copies of books that they never would have bought in the first place, myself included. There are certain elements of a review copy, it being free, you having some amount of access to the author to ask questions to get more information, that makes a review copy a better choice than buying a book. So if the author is giving away a copy to a reader who wouldn't have bought it in the first place, they have in fact saved no money, and therefore the idea of that retail price saved being their payment falls apart. But the obvious argument against book as payment is that authors don't accept books as payment. Authors are selling their books for money. They're not selling their books for other books. So if a book isn't payment to an author, why should it be payment to a reviewer? The actual incentive for reviewers, incentive, not payment, is the act and experience of reviewing in itself. Reviewers do what they do because they get something out of reading and reviewing books. There's catharsis, there's enjoyment, there could be a plethora of positive emotions, or maybe you read the sad books and you like crying. IDK, you do you. But if the act and experience becomes unenjoyable for whatever reason, there is no incentive to read that specific book. You're not enjoying it. Your only reason for doing it is gone. So why would you continue? And because it's a hobby, reviewing will often go to the wayside for a plethora of reasons. It could be something like life has taken a really harsh left turn and the person needs to focus on other more important priorities. Hobbies are usually the first to go in that time. Or it could just be, the brain's not feeling it right now. Yeah, these books look cool and I might want to read them later, but right now, the brain not into it. And those are valid reasons for a reviewer to not want to review. Because again, this is an unpaid hobby. I mentioned before that this dynamic is an ethical gray area. And I want to be clear, there is a way to make it ethical and a way to make it unethical, but it seems that people tend to cross those bounds a lot. The only way to make this dynamic of paid professionals trying to ask unpaid hobbyists to further their careers and make them more money is by making it optional, by making it not an obligation and putting no obligations on it. Quick caveat, just in case someone decides to take this section as bad faith critique. When I say authors and reviewers have no obligations to each other, I mean they have no obligations to each other as part of their craft. Yes, there are still baseline human decency metrics that should be kept to, like being honest in a review and not having any of the isms and not attacking anyone online or purposefully tagging someone in a negative review. That's just baseline human decency, baseline respect. That's not the same thing as stating that someone is obligated to give you a review or give you a review copy. There's a reason Big Daddy Publishing has never actually tried to write out legal contracts with reviewers. Because if you were to try to write out in actual legal documentation what you're asking reviewers to do, working unpaid labor so you can make money, so many institutions would be in exceedingly hot water with the legal government. That's unethical and just wrong. But by maintaining it as optional, as something that reviewers can opt in or out of purely depending on whether or not they want to, that's what keeps it ethical and legal. The lack of obligations is what keeps the dynamic from being exploitative labor. It's also important to note that this freedom goes both ways. The same way that a reviewer can renege on a promise to review without repercussions, an author or publisher can renege on sending out a review copy for no repercussions. Say previously a reviewer got copies and then didn't review, just don't send them anymore. Or maybe they did review, but you decided something about the review was iffy. You didn't like what they said, they were mean, and they waved their hands weirdly in a video. You can decide for any particular reason, not worth it, not sending out any more review copies for no repercussions. The same way that a reviewer has no legal obligations to the publisher or the publisher and the author has no legal obligations to the reviewer. Both sides are able to out of the conversation at any time and just walk away with no consequences. But now we are increasingly seeing authors, specifically indie authors, holding reviewers to more and more obligations. Things like, again, being only positive, no negativity, don't review under 3 stars, or things like requiring specific lengths, or considering certain reviews too long, or saying that reviewers should be helping authors improve their craft by giving them essentially beta reader style feedback. But again, the more obligations you put on the unpaid hobbyists you are using to make yourself more money, the more unethical and exploitative this whole dynamic becomes. Reviewers are doing this for fun, for enjoyment. It is not their job. You cannot use it as their job unless you are prepared to pay them. Now, yes, I am 100% sure that it absolutely sucks to do all the work of sending out review copies and get next to nothing in response. It has to feel awful. But that is the risk you took when you decided to use unpaid word of mouth as your marketing. Again, even indie authors have access to traditional marketing methods. You could be paying for ads and sponsored posts. You decided to take the gamble instead. So, complaining about taking the gamble not playing out for you doesn't make the reviewers look bad. It makes you look like you didn't understand what you were doing. Unpaid word of mouth reviews are always going to have a lot more weight to them, but that weight, that credit comes from that person not having obligations, that person just stating exactly what they think because they want to state it. If you attempt to change that, you lessen that post and make it just an unpaid ad. Future Margaret here. I wanted to jump in real quick and give some tips and tricks for indie authors that are in dire need of reviews. And they're fairly standard, but just in case you were unaware, 1, be very careful what you post on social media. The more you complain about not having enough reviews, complain about the reviews you have, complain about the certain concepts of reviews, again, like that reviews should be X, Y, and Z, the less likely people are going to want to review for you. And to maintain a lower cost, simply hand out PDF or other digital copies first. It's very normal to first hand out those digital copies, and then as the reviewer is repeatedly reviewing for you, then you can begin handing out physical copies. Or in some cases, I've reviewed a book in digital form and then had the author send me the physical copy for the video. I've been told me waving it around on camera is apparently part of my charm. But most importantly, be on your best behavior in general. Like I mentioned before, getting to interact with the author is part of the review incentive. If it's fun or at least nice and not anxiety-inducing to interact with the author, it's much more likely that reviewers are going to review from you and keep coming back. So there it is, my petty clapback turned video essay. Please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Have you seen this dude posting this trash take on Twitter? What are your thoughts on obligations? What is the weirdest obligation you've seen an author level at reviewers? Because I've seen some strange ones. Please let me know down in the comments. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.